Arc, for people that are watching the video or attempting to. I don't know what it's going to look like when I'm done color correcting it and editing it, but just driving from Outlook to Saskatoon right now, and I'm going to shut my face about that. So, wanted to have a conversation about tradition, and I think, what was the title again? Tradition, colon...
Yeah. Peer pressure from the dead people, or from dead people.
Yeah. Peer pressure from dead people. So, I can't believe that I haven't really talked about my views on tradition, or what I'm going to call tradition for tradition's sake, or tradition as a whole, before, but I looked and I combed through all like the podcast and vlog stuff, and I couldn't see anything. So, I thought it was a good time to talk about it now. Randy, one, is just, she hasn't done this before, and I think it'd be a good thing to compare thoughts. Like, I can rant by myself as much as I want, but it's just nice to have someone to like have a different viewpoint, especially with stuff like this. So that's what we're going to do. We'll talk about tradition, I guess maybe some of the stuff that we grew up with, some of the stuff that we would want to do in the future, and general thoughts about, I guess, how we feel about tradition and what that word even means, I guess. I make the distinction between tradition and tradition for tradition's sake for a reason, just because it's something that's been on my mind for years, that it's hard for me to say I don't like tradition, because to me tradition can be a good thing, it can be a nice thing, it can be constructive and positive. But a lot of the time when someone says the word, I think of it negatively, because most people, I feel, participate in tradition for tradition's sake. And that's where I think that quote about like tradition is just peer pressure from dead people comes in. It's like there's no reason for this tradition. There's nothing that it does other than be like, it's tradition. We just do it that way because we do. And that I don't like at all. If there's not like a reason for it, I think it's useless and doesn't need to happen.
Do you have traditions that your mom had with you, whether it be for Christmas time, whatever the case may be, that you would want to pass down or continue doing?
Some things, I guess we just kind of talked about it the other day. I guess that's the other thing I should mention, is that like, yeah, it's like 2 days before Christmas, and that's another good reason that we're just kind of had this on our minds and stuff. We didn't have a lot of Christmas tradition stuff, so for me, I guess that's a really good place to start, just like with our past and whatever. All my, like, a lot of traditions I think are really based off of family stuff, family traditions that you build over the course of years, or just some things that are just old as all heck. But all my family's in Chile, so it was just like, and when I was growing up and I was a kid, it was just my mom and I, and that was it. So until I was like in my tweens, and then there was a stepdad. But like, she didn't really like bring a lot of her Chilean like cultural traditional stuff in for me. It's hard. I think it's hard to have like family traditions when it's just two people. Like, I think maybe that's why, because we didn't have like a big family dynamic going on, or even like a regular sized one, or whatever you want to call it, the average. So I think that might be one reason. I know that even speaking the language, she just thought like, oh, you're little and you're in Canada now, you need to focus on English. So I didn't even learn Spanish really in the house. But I don't know when. The only thing I can think of right now, and the thing that you and I talked about earlier, that I was like, oh, maybe next year for Christmas we can do this at some point, because I have a smaller sister who's 13 years younger than me. At some point when she was little, for Christmas we started doing this thing where we just like would spin this bottle to see who gets to open their present next, and that kind of makes the whole thing longer, rather than like, hey, these are all yours, open them. These are all mine, open them. Like, which is what happens at your house right now.
Absolutely.
So and I was just, yeah, and that was my thing. It was like, well, maybe we could bring that in, like, because it's the only thing I can think of. I think you, even with, like I just said, with my mom, like, and it was just the two of us, and so we couldn't really do much. But I feel like you have like a couple things just with you and the girls that are tradition, or you've started to have some things already that I think are cool, like the movie night Christmas Eve, like, you get to open a brand new movie, and like if there was baking or whatever, and just, yeah, have some snacks, and I don't know, that's I don't know. There's simple little things like that I like, and they're not like traditions that are problematic in any way. They're just like fun things that you do. So those I have no issues with. I really can't think of anything else holiday related or not holiday related right now that we did that was like a tradition that I would call a tradition. What about you? Because you had way more family around in some aspects, in different phases of your life even.
Yeah, which is strange though, because I don't think that we really had any tradition around the holidays and stuff. But like my family, like your mom, moved, well, not out of country, but across Canada. So we didn't have anyone. It was just the 5 of us. And my parents aren't super tradition-y people. That's not a word.
So
I don't know, like the things that, like with the girls and stuff, it's all new. Like my girls, it's stuff that I've started when Emma was born 8 years ago. There's nothing I can think of that my parents have passed down, like, throughout the years.
yeah.
I don't know, yeah. I want, but that's the problem too. I find traditions to be, yeah, something that are so focused on that it's a problem for me. Like, I don't like how people put so much stress and energy into keeping certain things alive that aren't beneficial in any way.
So then where does that play a role, I guess, and you're saying like, oh, we've started these little traditions, like if we're talking about Christmas just as an example, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that hurts anybody,
right?
To like, and I think that the plans that we had to try and follow some of those traditions, like baking the cookies, we didn't even end up doing.
Yeah.
And it was okay. I would have liked to have done it just to
Absolutely.
Just to be in on it and just to keep it moving, but it's not like they even noticed.
No.
And so, but like with the last statement you made, like you have a hard time with tradition in general because of, you said like it can be stressful.
Absolutely. Well, when my parents first split when I was 8, it was, I felt they were trying to keep something alive that they shouldn't have, where we all celebrated Christmas together, even as they were like going through the divorce process and blah 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 blah, which just made things awkward. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just making it new for us, like Christmas here, Christmas there, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That they were trying to hold on to something that was, I think, a negative like feeling for the kids involved.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I just don't think holding on to things that worked in the past or something that needs, it just doesn't need to be brought forward. It's not something that I hold on to.
So you just reevaluate based on every new scenario you're given. Like that's an opportunity to have a new tradition.
Yeah.
Or just, that's the thing too. I guess tradition is something I've always thought of as like, this is old. This has been going on for years and years and years. So if you get a new opportunity to change things every 3 or 4 years or something, then it's just like, oh, that's just what we did, and now we do something else. I've never really been attached to certain traditions either, and I think that attachment can be unhealthy. Like when you said like, oh, people start stressing about things, or I have a really big thing about dependence on anything. Like I don't really like the concept of like I'm dependent on this thing or that thing for whatever reason, because I think that can be unhealthy, and I think it can lead in this context to some of the things you've mentioned of like, well, just being stressed out trying to keep a tradition alive, or like if the parties in that scenario aren't, if it's not a healthy relationship to have, then why have everyone together just so you can have a bad time, or a stressful time, or whatever. So that I understand for sure. And I just can't think of anything that was like, I've just never really been one to be like, oh, that was so nice though, we used to do it that way all the time, and it's just like, I don't know, it was just coincidental for me that I didn't really have that around, and that may lead to my feelings about it, whereas I know a lot of other people had a lot more of that going on, and then when you break it or you want to break it, it's like a big deal for them. The only thing I can think of, I guess I just thought of it now, is like how some people, like for birthdays or for Christmas or whatever, it's like, I want to see you on your actual birthday, and I'm like, I mean, like I would like that, but if it doesn't work out, who cares? Like, I'm like, the whole point is that we're celebrating together, or we're just getting together, what have you. Like, it shouldn't be like I need to do it on that day, because if I don't, then what happens? Nothing.
Well, yeah, no, I agree completely. I've said that since as long as I can remember. These things are just days. Like, Christmas to me is just a day. It's the feeling that's involved with it that's important. It's the feeling of celebrating your birthday with someone in any kind of way, but it doesn't matter what the day is to me. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not, the day is not, well, I mean, just like this Christmas even, with the girls, like celebrating on the 22nd, and they had just as much fun as if they were to wake up on the 25th.
Yeah.
So, yeah, days aren't really
would be the other thing, is that the reason that it wasn't upset, well, I mean, one is too young, and the other one is just because you've, at this point, it seems like you've been able to raise them up to this, sorry, deer.
You almost killed us on camera.
It was in the ditch. I was saying, before I saw that deer, that, like, because your tradition, it could be, or I shouldn't call it a tradition, the way that you've conditioned your family scenario is that tradition doesn't matter as much.
Right.
Therefore, in some cases, like, it wasn't important that we did it on the 23rd rather than 25th. Whereas if you put importance on that from the beginning, that would have been transferred to them. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I should have looked up the definition of tradition before I started this.
I feel like it's going way off course.
Well, no. I don't think so. I just feel like I don't know how to get back to that word. Like because I don't even know how to define it right now.
Right.
In a way, like, I know what I'm talking about, but I don't know how to say, like, this is tradition, this is what I mean by tradition, like, because I have a lot of thoughts. Because I was like, oh, why don't I have a tradition of critical thinking or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
Does that count as a tradition? Like, it's not cultural, it's family. Well, you would have family culture too, right? Family tradition. And, like, it doesn't have anything that was to do with a larger culture or heritage or anything like that. Anyway, yeah, I don't remember where I was going to go after that statement of, like, how, but that's the thing, you said, like, oh, it's about the day, right? So when it comes to those things, I think maybe tradition and culture play hand in hand more than I was thinking. Establishing a culture, because I feel like a culture is something that is, I don't know what the word is, repetitive. Like, we have this type of dress, we use these type of colors, this is what our thing is, this is our coat of arms doesn't change, this is, like, our motto, or all those things, right? So that could be, like, school culture, that could be like a place that your family's from, or they lived, or whatever, geographical location. Yeah, so I might use those words interchangeably, I guess, here, like, or culture and tradition, maybe. But what do you think of when you think of, like, I kind of mentioned, when I hear the word tradition, period, I don't think positive thoughts. I know that you can create positive traditions, or some are just really neutral and don't bother me, and I'm like, oh, that's like a nice thing. Let's,
right.
If it was just like, yeah, let's all get together and watch a movie Christmas Eve, and that's just our thing that we do, and that's nice. And hey, if it doesn't work out one year, that's okay too. It's like we're traveling or something, and we're visiting people, and it doesn't happen, but it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool, nice little thing. That doesn't bother me. But like I said, when someone says the word tradition, or I see the word tradition, it makes me want to roll my eyes usually and be like, hey, what is this?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, I found, like, my mother's side of the family is far more religious than my dad's side. So when I think of, like, traditions, especially around the holidays of any sort, it's a lot of, like, visiting the family at church. So that's, like, and that's what it's, like, really based on. Like, Christmas Eve is church, Christmas after your dinner is church, Boxing Day is church.
Oh, wow.
Easter is church, like...
That's a lot of church in 3 days.
Well, I don't know if they go all 3 days, but there's always something.
Opportunity.
Yes. And so to me, just a lot of church with tradition, and that's, I think, where it turns sour for me, because it's not how I see tradition, or how my children are raised to be traditional in that way, I guess.
Yeah. I didn't have that much church going on for tradition stuff. Like, there was just actually, we had less church, I think. I think instead of like a 3-hour meeting, it was a 2-hour meeting. I think now they're all just 2-hour meetings, because they've changed things around since I was regularly attending. But yeah, I think we had even less church. It definitely wasn't more. It was just a different style of a meeting. Right. It was like, oh, we're going to do like a Christmas meeting thing. It's going to be a little different. But my recollection was that it was even shorter than normal. But that brings me to the church thing, because that's one thing, I guess, like, when we talk about churches in general, I think that is one area where it's, like, based so much on tradition for tradition's sake that doesn't make sense. I don't like, yeah, when I say tradition for tradition's sake, it's stuff that has no logical or reasonable explanation for why it should still be that way. Because there's some things that are a certain way for a certain amount of time, and then things change. We evolve, we grow as people or culture or whatever, and we realize there's things that we did before that maybe we don't need to do anymore. Whereas then you get stuck in a system or a structure like certain churches, and everything's the same as it was before just because that's the way it was. And I don't know, that's one thing that when I think of tradition, I think of church a lot, or like just different churches. And I don't even mean necessarily like worshiping a higher power, because you can do that without a church.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's what defines a church in a way, is tradition and structure. And some of those structures can be a little more fluid. Like some people adapt to things like, what is it, the Alliance Church or whatever, United, I don't know, that, yeah, well, I mean, that they kind of like, with the times and the awareness and education, they have moved with like, yeah, we perform gay marriages and we believe in equality and like all that stuff, whereas a lot of other churches did not do that, especially like in the Christian faith. That's not really a thing that adapted very well for some people, or for some organizations. So that's one thing that rubs me the wrong way, again, is like, why are we doing this thing? Just because it's the way it's always been done? Or education. Like, I work in the education field and in that structure and in that whole thing, and like, the structure that we have now was based off of like war, of producing like certain things and certain subjects and certain whatever. The way that we did it was just like factory work, like prepping people for that. It's like, that's not really what we need right now. Like, I understand that it'd be really difficult to change the whole structure of things, but what we're doing right now isn't really helpful in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't you say like the art program hasn't changed since when?
In Alberta, the last time the art curriculum was revised was 1986, which is the year I was born.
Oh man.
Yeah. And like, it takes a long time for government to change curriculum, like a long time. It doesn't. I don't think it has to be that way. It just ends up being that way. And they do. Well, that's the thing. That's the high school art curriculum, because they do the little kid stuff first all the time, then they move up to high school, and then with high school they do the core subjects first, and they do options after.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I thought that line that kind of sparked this whole thought that tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. Like, I thought that was funny and amusing to me, and also highlighted the point of like, yeah, tradition for tradition's sake is like, I feel like the people that fall into those, what I'm going to call traps of a tradition for tradition's sake, are generally people that I don't like, generally, because to me there's a certain amount of critical thinking involved so that you don't do that, because why are you doing it? Again, like, if it's not constructive, it could be like a fun thing that's just a fun, neutral, whatever. But if it becomes, some people attach their, like, the traditions are attached, or like, their feelings and thoughts about certain subjects, like gay marriage or certain types of equality, are attached to a tradition of thought. And they haven't revised that. They just said, like, this is the way that my parents did it, and that's the way their grandparents did it, and blah, 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 blah. And even though things have changed, I just don't think anything different. And that's where it becomes really hard for me. Like I said, if people are super into tradition stuff just for whatever reason, it's usually an indicator to me that they don't have a lot of critical thinking skills, and they're okay with it.
Yeah, I see. I've never, like, when I hear the word tradition, that's not something that comes to mind. But now I can see how that word holds such a negative, like, vibe for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That opens like a whole hallway of doors.
I wish I could remember this like little story better, and I don't remember where I heard it. I think it was at like a PD day, a professional development thing for school or something. But they were talking about, it was like a recipe or something. Oh, yeah, because I don't remember the punchline, it's gonna be stupid. But it was like a baking thing, and it was like, oh, this is great grandma's recipe from whatever, and they were baking, and then it was like, why do we do it this way again? And then they're like, you know what, I don't know, that's a good question. And it was like, they called up someone else, like grandma, and it was like, oh, that's because great grandma didn't have like a spatula, or it was something stupid. It was like, yeah, that thing didn't exist, that's why they did it that way. Like, we have the tools now to like to do things differently. So what, like, yeah, like I said, it's things change and evolve and whatever, and people should too. And when that doesn't happen, like I said, it's really difficult for me to, I don't know, to me that kind of just like moves someone a little bit down my, I don't know how to, yeah. I don't think as highly of people generally that are in that category than I would of people that were very willing to change and be open and free with challenging tradition. Like, I didn't bring that word up before, but yeah, that's the thing. I think we should challenge everything to learn and grow and whatever, right? But challenging tradition is something I do a lot. It's just to ask, it's just simple as like, why? Why did we do it that way? And then someone can tell me, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Then I move on. And other times it doesn't make any sense, and then I fight it. And then I keep asking why, which gets annoying for some people. Are there any traditions that you feel like have been passed down at all that were like good?
That were good?
That you like would hold on to maybe, or the idea of them you like?
Man, I do not think so.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it sucks, because I find in Canada, the East Coast, like Newfoundland and stuff, are the most traditional, most, I don't want to say cultured because that's not the right word. People, like, they have traditions, whereas
I think I know what you mean though, is that they maintain, like,
yes.
we are maritime culture.
Yes.
Whereas I can say prairies, I'm sure they have a certain culture, but to me, there's a lot more diversity.
Yes.
I think, and maybe that's what breaks up the being defined by your culture.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, there's lots of stuff like mummers and blah 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 blah, like for holidays or whatever. But it was nothing I ever witnessed, dealt with. Oh, I moved I'm sure I did when I was little, but I moved when I was so young that, and my parents didn't. Ew,
yeah, I did.
My parents didn't hold on to any of it. Like your mom, not a lot of it came with them and stuck with them.
Yeah.
So really, the tradition for us starts at my parents. It doesn't. So it's kind of the same scenario as you, I guess. When it comes to, how'd you word it? Tradition of thought?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go through my Facebook sometime. And that's something that a weak-minded person, I guess, could be swayed easily in a certain direction in my family.
You mean like, what do you mean?
Like, having certain thoughts on whether it be certain political parties, certain sexual orientations, certain anything like that people believe are wrong or right, and it's passed down through the families, is very strong in Newfoundland.
Okay, so they can't be swayed much from it.
No, like, if like someone like me who's away from it physically,
yeah,
if they were to go back there, it's so strong that they could be easily, I feel it, they could be easily brought to believe what these people are believing, because it's such a strong, it's not very open. It's not, people there aren't as open-minded, I find, as out west.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I don't have a clue. I actually have no idea. Nothing that I'll say on camera.
I guess the only thing I can think of is the lack of diversity. Mm-hmm. If you're in a smaller community in general, that isn't, you don't have exposure to different types of people even,
right.
like, as much, anyway. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of the political thing before, too, because that's a perfect example of just, like, people carrying on a tradition, being like, my parents are conservative, so I'm conservative, because...
Oh, and that is, yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Conversations I get into, and nobody knows my political view at all. I mean, you didn't until months and months and months and months.
Yeah, I had an assumption, and my assumption was incorrect.
Thanks. But yeah, and, like, discussions I've had with people who don't have the same political views as me, typically, like 75% of the time, they're not giving me information as to why they follow this party. It's just because that's what they know. That's what their parents told them.
Yeah.
And that annoys me, because I don't have the same views as both my parents. Like,
yeah.
I don't need to. So yeah, that's just something that really bugs me, is people who can't break free of that. Ugh.
I guess conversations we had even before we were dating that I liked, and that was a thing of like, what if I could just call it a tradition, being like a tradition of critical thinking, or a tradition of like openness, and like that, you know, is and like, yeah, open conversations and communication and whatever, so that people are given more choice.
Right.
Or just like openly saying, hey, this is the way I do it, but just to let you know, just because I do it this way doesn't mean it's the only way.
Right.
Just because I believe in this thing doesn't mean you have to believe in this thing. And I think that, I don't know, I'm finding it interesting and tricky as to when to have those conversations, because I think there's certain things that, like, if it was part of the culture from well, speaking of children, I guess I should clarify, like, if it was like part of the culture from the get-go, there wouldn't be as much need for a conversation for a long time,
Right.
or for challenging, because it's like, this is just the way it is. But sometimes you've got other people, you know, in like, let's say it's family or friends or whatever, that your children might spend a lot of time with, and they get accustomed to certain things, and then they're not the things that you would have had them be that part of their culture or part of their tradition or part of their thought process. And then it's like, well, how do I correct that? How do I correct that? Like,
Right.
it's just difficult to, I'm saying for me, just to think of like challenging, like, hey, well, just to be like, hey, why do you believe that thing? It's like, well, you're only 8, so maybe it's gonna be hard to answer that, because like, well, because this person does. I don't know, or it's even hard for them to say, I don't know, I think. But yeah, that's the thing that's been on my mind sometimes too, is just like, how do we introduce that, like, you can challenge things, and me challenging you isn't a bad thing, and you can challenge me, and you can challenge anyone,
Right.
and try to figure out why you believe what you believe in the first place.
I find, found, I guess, in the last, like, 3 weeks, has been a huge challenge at my house. And then like you said, with the open conversation or communication, I don't want to be that mom who's like, well, that's dumb that you believe that, because like, you can't believe it because it's not true, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
When they might very well grow up to continue believing this thing. It's whatever makes them happy, I guess.
Yeah, but then that's going to lead in a whole other conversation, which maybe we should have sometime, maybe, about like ignorance is bliss, because like whatever makes them happy, but that doesn't necessarily make them smart, and that's a whole, like I said, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I don't know. The tradition thing is, like I said, there's things that I think are like harmless and fun and whatever, but I think the key thing for me in trying to like wrap things up is to not be dependent on the tradition.
Right. Tradition should be fun, not a crutch.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there. It should be fun and not a crutch. And then I guess furthering that, if it's a tradition of being open-minded and critical and thinking critically, I think that's very constructive. And it's also not like a very specific, like, it's just like we talk and we're open and we want to challenge things. It's not like very specific, like, we believe this thing because we do. And like, no, it's like we believe in conversation and whatever because that's how we learn and grow as people. So that's a tradition I back. Do you have any other comments or anything?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, those are some thoughts on tradition, culture. I don't really know how else to wrap that up.
Don't be peer pressured by the dead.
Don't be peer pressured by the dead. Perfect. We'll see you on another time.